Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, gentlemen. I think you're both doing a terrific job. Chairman Giancarlo, when is the last time you bought a stock, exchange-traded fund, mutual fund, or a bond?
So I hold generally traded funds.
Yes. When's the last time you bought one?
Well, probably before I pretty much put my investing.
A year ago?
Well, probably before I started at the commission.
2 years ago?
Yes.
Okay. When you bought it, what'd you buy? Equity or bond?
Index funds mostly.
Index funds, okay. When you bought it, did you sit down and read the prospectus for the index fund?
Well, I'm not
Cover
supposed to
to
say
cover.
this as a lawyer. I'm not supposed to say that I probably didn't read it cover to cover, but I will confess that I didn't read it cover to cover.
How many investors do you think do that? Don't read it,
I think most.
okay? So what's the point? I mean, we're talking about all the dangers and the risks of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. I'm putting aside the shyster fraud issue. I mean, what's the point of all this over-disclosure if nobody's reading it?
Well,
And why do we want to do the same thing with Bitcoin?
I'll say historically it's been one of the foundational principles of our securities laws that adequacy of disclosure, full disclosure, is one of the building blocks. I will tell you, having been in business, that most business people will tell you they study the prospectus only to see what they can sue on if they need to sue on something if something goes wrong.
I mean, I think you see where I'm going. I'm going to ask you both a philosophical question in a second about how far you think we ought to go to protect people from themselves. But I don't think the disclosure we have right now works. I think it's good for the lawyers, and it's good for the financial advisors. But I think we over-disclose. And I think you can, I'll bet you each have a smart lawyer on your staff. You could go to them and say, write me a good disclosure for Bitcoin. And you would get it back and look at it and then pick 50 names from the Washington, D.C. phone book and ask them to come in and say, read this and tell me if it makes sense to you. I mean, what's the point? How far do you think we ought to go here in terms of cryptocurrency? I'm separating this from the blockchain technology. I mean, China outlawed it. So I think South Korea has too. What are you suggesting, that we just go after the shysters and fully disclose? I mean, is that what you think we ought to do?
Well,
Secretary,
yeah.
or Chairman Clark?
Senator, I think that is exactly the question we're here to pose and take forward, which is, what is the right way to deal with this new technology? I'm not, as just a person watching it, I'm not satisfied when I see people thinking that these trading platforms of cryptocurrencies have the same kind of protections that a stock exchange would. And I'm very unhappy that people are conducting ICOs, like public offerings of stock, when they should know that they should be following the private placement rules unless they're registering with us. Those two things make me unhappy. We're figuring out how to deal with them is why we're here. I agree with you that we should be careful not to go too far. But for me, just to be clear, for me in this ICO space, it's pretty clear that when people are violating our securities laws work pretty well. Disclosure can be improved. It can really be improved.
Well, let me make this suggestion because I don't want to go over. Last time I asked questions, I got a little carried away. I think I went over 3 minutes. And our ranking member put me on double secret probation. So I'm not going to do that today.
Like I have the power to do that.
He does. The disclosure, I mean, you can extend the disclosure we have now to Bitcoin, and you haven't done anything. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have disclosure, but you got to have disclosure that makes sense and helps people other than the lawyers.
I agree, Senator.